Let's get you all caught up on what's happening around the world.
Starting with the aftermath of Cyclone Cheeto.
This one really hit the French island territory of Mayotte hard.
Hundreds feared, dead settlements flattened, and critical infrastructure is just gone.
Yeah, some of these resident stories are just awful.
They're describing shortages of necessities.
One resident said the island looks like a war zone.
Right, and it's a complicated situation because Mayotte has a large, undocumented migrant population, many of whom were already living in precarious conditions.
Making them extremely vulnerable in a situation like this.
French President Macron offered condolences, and rescue efforts are underway.
The road to recovery will undoubtedly be long.
Cyclone Cheeto also impacted Mozambique, causing flooding and damage.
And it's raising concerns from UNICEF about potential disease outbreaks.
Shifting focus now to the Korean Peninsula,
South Korea is in a political crisis after the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol.
tied to his decision to declare martial law.
He claimed it was necessary to prevent North Korean interference.
But it led to huge protests and calls for his resignation.
Recent polls show most South Koreans support the impeachment,
And this is actually the third time a South Korean president has faced impeachment.
which tells you a bit about the political landscape there.
The Constitutional Court will now decide whether to remove Yoon permanently or to reinstate him.
Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is currently acting president.
And the resignation of the ruling People Power Party's leader just adds another layer of uncertainty to this whole thing.
Okay, switching gears a bit to a story that might raise some eyebrows.
In Fiji, a group of tourists were hospitalized after a possible poisoning incident.
7 tourists, mainly Australians, fell ill after drinking pina coladas at a 5-star resort.
Yeah, reminds you of that recent incident in Laos where tourists died from methanol poisoning.
The responses have been interesting.
Fijian officials are calling it an isolated incident and downplaying the situation, while Australian officials have actually issued travel warnings about drink spiking.
Showing the various approaches different countries take when managing these events and the impact they have on tourism,
Let's go over to the Black Sea now.
where 2 Russian oil tankers wrecked in the Kerch Strait, causing a significant oil spill.
One image I saw shows one of the tankers with its bow completely severed.
The rescue operation has been difficult because of bad weather, and sadly, there's been at least 1 death.
This is a crucial route for Russian exports, including oil, which has been under international sanctions since the war in Ukraine began,
There's speculation that the tankers were part of Russia's Ghost Fleet.
which uses older and often poorly maintained vessels to get around sanctions.
Authorities are investigating the incident, looking at the potential for criminal negligence and environmental damage.
It's good news now.
Brazilian President Lula da Silva has been released from the hospital after undergoing surgery for a brain bleed.
This stemmed from a fall he had back in October, an incident that was initially covered up.
Lula seems to be recovering well.
He expressed gratitude for the support he's received and even offered forgiveness to those who harbor hate towards him.
A really powerful gesture, given the very politically charged environment in Brazil.
It looks like President Lula is ready to get back to work.
And his recovery will be closely watched as Brazil deals with its ongoing economic and political challenges.
Back in Australia.
A group known as the Bali Nine returned home after nearly 20 years in Indonesian prisons for drug smuggling.
Their story goes back to 2005 when they were caught trying to smuggle heroin out of Bali.
It was a very high-profile case, especially after 2 of the ringleaders were executed back in 2015.
The 5 members returning home this week expressed relief and said they're ready to reintegrate back into society.
The Australian Prime Minister even acknowledged the Indonesian government's compassion in allowing their return.
Which is significant considering the strained diplomatic relations that followed those executions.
Shifting to the Middle East now, where there's been a major development.
The Assad dynasty in Syria has come to an end after over 50 years in power.
It happened very quickly, too.
A rebel coalition led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has taken control, prompting cautious responses from the international community.
HTS has a controversial history, initially aligned with al-Qaeda, but now presenting a more moderate image.
Yeah, HTS leader Abu Muhammad al-Jilani has even changed his name back to his birth name, Ahmed al-Shura, as part of this rebranding.
HTS has established the Syrian Salvation Government in areas they control, aiming to appear legitimate.
However, there have been protests against their rule, concerns about their governance, and questions about their actual intentions.
This power shift in Syria is huge.
With consequences that could ripple throughout the region and beyond.
HTS has taken some steps that, on the surface, seem conciliatory.
like releasing prisoners from Saydnaya prison
a prison infamous for its brutal conditions.
and pledging safety and inclusivity for all Syrians.
Even offering assurances to Russia that their military bases in Syria would be safe if they halted attacks.
The world is watching closely to see what direction Syria takes under HTS and how they'll address the needs of the Syrian people.
Back in the U.S. now.
President-elect Trump has pledged to end daylight saving time.
It's not a new debate, but his announcement has re-energized discussion about the pros and cons of changing our clocks twice a year.
People who support ending daylight saving time often mention potential negative health effects and how it disrupts sleep patterns.
Those who are for it highlight potential benefits like reduced crime rates and energy conservation due to extended daylight hours.
There are even economic arguments on both sides.
Each claiming their approach is best for businesses and consumers.
Trump's position has definitely brought this long-standing issue back into the spotlight.
Interestingly, Trump's policy agenda might be influenced by an unexpected source, Argentina's new president, Javier Milei.
Milei, a libertarian who advocates for drastic cost-cutting measures, has the backing of Elon Musk, who'll be advising Trump.
Milei's policies, while effective in Argentina's specific context, might not translate well to the U.S.
Milei and Trump might align on certain cultural issues,
but their economic strategies differ, particularly on trade.
It'll be interesting to see if and how Milei's ideas influence the Trump administration.
Turning to a story highlighting the darker side of social media.
The murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has led to a troubling online phenomenon.
A Florida woman was arrested for making threats against an insurance company using the exact wording found on bullet casings at the crime scene.
This points to a broader trend, a growing online fandom surrounding the murder suspect, Luigi Mangione.
People are calling him a folk hero, even holding look-alike contests and raising money for his legal defense.
It's a chilling example of how social media can distort our understanding of crime.
Experts say this reaction is tied to widespread anger and frustration with the U.S. healthcare system and insurance companies in particular.
The case has prompted some reflection within the industry.
But we need to remember that amidst this online spectacle, a life was lost.
Brian Thompson, a husband and a father, was murdered.
Let's shift focus to the human cost of the Syrian conflict now.
Rebels liberated prisoners from Saydnaya prison, known for its horrific conditions.
We're hearing firsthand accounts from some of the prisoners released, describing torture, sexual assault, forced confessions, disease, and starvation.
The men endured unimaginable cruelty.
They describe beatings with metal staffs, cables, and electric sticks.
One even described being held upside down in a barrel of water as punishment.
The prisoners spoke of executions, names called out at midnight, never to be seen again.
They also described their families desperately trying to bribe officials for visitation rights or to save their loved ones from execution.
It was a system built to crush dissent and instill terror.
But these men held on to hope.
And now with their release, they're finally experiencing freedom.
Their stories are a powerful reminder of the human cost of conflict and the enduring strength of hope.
The story doesn't end there, though.
The Assad family, after decades of iron-fisted rule, now faces an uncertain future.
Bashar al-Assad, along with his wife and children, have reportedly received asylum in Russia.
A staunch ally throughout the conflict.
They fled Damascus as rebel forces closed in on the capital.
Assad's downfall is the end of an era.
His family's rule, spanning over 50 years, has been marked by brutality, repression, and a devastating civil war.
The international community is trying to understand the implications of this sudden power vacuum.
There are concerns about the region's stability, the rise of extremist groups, and the fate of the millions of Syrians displaced by the conflict.
The situation is fluid and unpredictable.
And now for the story we teased at the beginning.
Georgia, navigating its own political turmoil and aspirations for EU membership, has a new president.
And his background is unusual, to say the least.
Mikhail Kabalishvili, a former Manchester City footballer, has taken the helm.
But his appointment has been met with controversy.
Opposition groups are boycotting parliament, claiming the recent elections were rigged.
And protests demanding fresh elections are happening throughout the country.
Georgia is at a crossroads,
with its pro-EU goals clashing with the government's actions.
This standoff could have significant consequences for the country's democratic future.
Kabalishvili's leadership will be tested as he navigates these very turbulent waters. Shifting to Thailand now.
Where a festival was hit by tragedy.
A bombing at the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair in Tak Province has left the community reeling.
An explosive device detonated near a stage,
where people were dancing.
At least 3 people have been killed and dozens injured.
some critically,
Emergency responders worked to care for the wounded.
amidst the chaos and confusion,
Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra offered condolences.
and ordered a full investigation.
Security has been increased at festivals all across Thailand.
This tragedy underscores the indiscriminate nature of violence and the need for vigilance in public spaces.
Authorities are working to determine a motive and to find those responsible.
Remember those tourists in Fiji we talked about earlier?
Well, there's an update on their situation.
2 of the Australian women, a mother and daughter, have been cleared to return home after receiving treatment for the suspected poisoning.
That's good news.
But the investigation is ongoing.
To determine what exactly caused their illness and the illness of the other tourists,
They're analyzing the drinks.
trying to see if there is any foul play involved.
This incident has raised concerns about tourist safety in Fiji.
And Australian officials are advising travelers to be cautious and watch out for potential drink spiking.
Back in the U.S. now.
There's been a development in a legal case involving former President Trump and ABC News.
ABC News agreed to pay Trump $15 million to settle a defamation lawsuit.
Stemming from false statements made by their anchor George Stephanopoulos.
During an interview, Stephanopoulos repeatedly said that Trump had been found liable for rape.
But that was not true.
A jury in a civil case found Trump liable for sexual abuse, which has a different legal definition under New York law.
Right.
As part of the settlement, ABC News issued a statement acknowledging their mistake and expressed regret for the inaccurate statements.
The $15 million will go toward a future presidential library for Trump.
This case really underscores how important accuracy is in reporting, especially when dealing with sensitive and legally charged issues.
Back to Syria now, where, as we mentioned earlier, HTS has emerged as the dominant force.
They are facing criticism
From both inside the country and internationally.
for their past ties to al-Qaeda.
Right. Those past associations are raising a lot of concerns.
Despite their claims of a clean break,
However, they are trying to project a more moderate image,
with actions like releasing prisoners from Sednaya,
pledging safety and inclusion for all Syrians.
even reaching out to Russia with assurances about their military bases.
Are these actions genuine or are they strategic?
Hard to say.
They could be both.
It's a very calculated effort to gain legitimacy and control,
It's a high-stakes game for them.
both inside Syria and on the world stage.
The world is watching to see what kind of Syria will emerge from the ashes of the Assad regime,
But sadly, another festival was struck by violence.
this time in Thailand.
The bombing at the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair has taken the lives of at least 3 people and injured many more.
It's a terrible reminder of the vulnerability of civilians in public gatherings.
The details surrounding the explosion are still emerging.
But authorities are working to determine the cause and find those responsible for this awful act.
Back to the Korean Peninsula now.
Where the political turmoil in South Korea continues,
The impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol is about to begin.
the Constitutional Court announced that it will proceed with the trial.
Even though there are 3 vacant justice positions,
The public hearings are expected to take months.
but there's a lot of pressure for a swift decision.
To address the political uncertainty,
There are protests on both sides of the issue.
demonstrating how divided South Korean society is right now.
President Yoon, who remains defiant, has ignored a summons from prosecutors.
Adding another layer of complexity to this already intricate situation.
The world is watching as this critical impeachment trial unfolds.
A trial that will have a significant impact on South Korea's political future and stability.
Turning back to the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson,
The investigation has taken a concerning turn
a Florida woman has been arrested,
and charged with making threats against an insurance company.
using the same wording found on bullet casings at the crime scene,
This is a disturbing development.
further highlighting the unsettling fascination with the suspect, Luigi Mangione.
And this troubling trend of celebrating violence against people perceived as symbols of corporate greed.
It's a trend we've been talking about,
The strange online fandom surrounding Mangione.
fueled by anger towards the U.S. healthcare system.
We've seen these look-alike contests,
People praising his actions.
even financial support for his legal defense.
This case goes beyond the legal aspects.
It sparked a conversation about social media's influence on how we perceive crime and the dangers of celebrating violence.
It's a stark reminder of how online platforms can be used to amplify and legitimize harmful ideologies.
We need to be more aware and think critically as we engage with the online world.
Let's move on to a story about forgiveness and resilience.
Brazil's President Lula da Silva is continuing his recovery after surgery.
And he's setting his sights on the challenges ahead.
In a recent statement, he expressed gratitude for the support he's received.
and even offered forgiveness to those who hold hatred toward him,
A gesture that's really resonated with a lot of people.
especially in such a politically charged environment.
It speaks to President Lula's commitment to unity and healing as he leads Brazil,
It's a powerful message of compassion and strength.
that people are really paying attention to both in Brazil and around the world.
Now for a story about the enduring effects of injustice and the hope for freedom.
One of the Bali Nine drug smugglers who recently returned to Australia, Scott Rush, shared details about his time in Indonesian prisons.
He described being beaten, starved, and subjected to psychological torture.
It's a pretty harrowing glimpse into the realities of Indonesia's penal system and the long-term effects on those in prison there.
Despite everything he endured, Rush expressed gratitude for being given a second chance.
And he really emphasized the importance of rehabilitation and supporting people as they re-enter society after serving their sentences.
His story reminds us about the complexities of justice and redemption.
And there's an update on that defamation case between former President Trump and ABC News.
As part of the settlement, ABC News will publish an editor's note acknowledging the inaccuracies in their reporting.
The note will be added to their online article about the story.
And it clarifies that their anchor George Stephanopoulos made false statements about Trump being found liable for rape,
It's a significant step towards setting the record straight.
and acknowledging the impact of inaccurate reporting, especially on such a sensitive topic.
Let's return to the human cost of the conflict in Syria.
We're hearing more harrowing stories from those who survived the horrors of Saydnaya prison,
One former inmate described the prison as a breathing corpse.
highlighting the chilling dehumanization and suffering that occurred there.
He spoke of severe beatings, starvation disease, and the constant fear of execution
His back was actually broken when a guard jumped on him.
as punishment for a minor infraction.
These accounts are incredibly difficult to hear,
But they're essential in understanding the brutality of the Assad regime.
and the long road to healing that survivors face.
They highlight the crucial need for accountability for human rights abuses and the urgency of justice and reconciliation in Syria.
Former President Trump has ignited another debate.
This time, about time.
His vow to end daylight saving time has brought a long-standing discussion about changing our clocks twice a year back into the public eye.
Some experts believe Trump's stance might be influenced by Argentina's new president, Javier Milei.
Milei, a libertarian known for his focus on cost-cutting measures,
He's been praised by Elon Musk.
who you might remember will be advising Trump.
While Milei's policies have worked in Argentina, it's not clear they'd translate well to the U.S.,
The debate about daylight saving time is sure to continue.
with lawmakers weighing the impact on different aspects of American life,
Let's go back to Georgia now.
where the political situation has taken a dramatic turn.
With the appointment of this new president, Mikhail Kavelishvili, a former footballer,
His presidency is off to a very rocky start,
opposition groups claim the recent elections were rigged.
and they've rejected his legitimacy.
Protests are happening across the country.
The outgoing president, Salome Zurabishvili, even called Kavelishvili's election a travesty.
Arguing that she represents the last legitimate institution in Georgia,
This turmoil really highlights the deep divisions in Georgian society.
particularly surrounding their aspirations for EU membership and concerns about the ruling party's authoritarian tendencies.
The international community is watching closely.
As Georgia grapples with its democratic future,
It remains to be seen how Kavelishvili will handle these challenges.
and if he can unify a nation that appears deeply divided,
Back in the U.S.,
former President Trump is facing more legal scrutiny.
a federal magistrate judge ordered Trump to provide sworn evidence in a defamation case brought by ABC News.
This order related to statements made by the network's anchor, George Stephanopoulos.
Is just another legal challenge for Trump as he prepares for his return to the White House.
This case highlights the complex legal landscape that Trump's navigating.
With multiple lawsuits and investigations still pending.
It's a reminder that legal battles from his previous presidency still loom over his political comeback.
Let's take a closer look at the situation in Syria,
Assad's downfall has created ripples across the region.
particularly in neighboring Israel.
Israel launched airstrikes on suspected Syrian government chemical weapons and missile facilities.
The Israeli government claims these strikes were preemptive.
aimed at preventing these weapons from falling into the wrong hands.
It's a response to the deteriorating security situation in Syria
This development emphasizes the already heightened tensions in the region.
and the potential for the Syrian conflict to spill over into neighboring countries.
It's a volatile situation,
That could very easily escalate.
leading to further instability.
Let's go back to that story about public anger towards the U.S. healthcare system.
Remember the online fandom surrounding Luigi Mangione?
The suspect in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
Well, it seems the fascination has taken a rather disturbing turn towards profit.
Free Luigi merchandise is being sold online,
Some platforms like Amazon are removing these items.
but they're still popping up on other websites.
This raises some pretty serious ethical questions.
Is it okay to profit off a murder case?
Are we inadvertently celebrating violence?
It's a worrying trend.
It also shows how internet culture can sometimes take tragic events and turn them into a spectacle.
A commodity.
Down in South America,
President Lula da Silva's recovery continues
he's back in Brasilia.
and has resumed his official duties after brain bleed surgery,
It's great that he's back at work.
signaling a return to normalcy for the Brazilian government,
Of course, his recent health scare underscores the pressures and demands of leadership.
especially at his age,
Former President Trump's vow to end daylight saving time is still creating buzz.
with people voicing both support and opposition to his stance.
Those in favor of Trump's position believe changing our clocks twice a year disrupts sleep patterns.
And has negative health effects,
They also point to potential economic benefits.
like increased productivity and reduced energy use,
Opponents argue that permanent daylight saving time would mean darker mornings,
especially during winter.
potentially making commutes more dangerous.
They're also concerned about the disruption to established schedules and routines,
This debate shows how complex timekeeping can be.
and how it affects different parts of society.
Trump's announcement has definitely re-energized this long-standing debate,
Back to the devastating news from Thailand.
where a community is coming to terms with the aftermath of the bombing at a festival,
The attack targeted the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair in Tak Province.
killing at least 3 people and injuring many more.
It's cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful celebration.
The details surrounding the explosion are still emerging.
But authorities are diligently working to determine the cause and find those responsible for this horrific act,
This tragedy reminds us of how vulnerable civilians are
especially in crowded spaces.
and the impact such acts of violence have,
Authorities are working hard to understand what motivated this attack.
and find the people responsible.
But the emotional scars will undoubtedly remain long after the investigation concludes.
In Brazil,
President Lula da Silva demonstrated a powerful act of unity.
in his first public appearance since brain bleed surgery, he extended an olive branch to those who harbor hatred towards him.
He talked about moving forward.
With compassion and understanding,
His message resonated in a politically divided Brazil
his words offer hope
for healing and reconciliation.
in a nation grappling with political polarization.
It's a message of strength and unity.
That has caught the world's attention. In Georgia,
The newly appointed president, Mikhail Kavalashvili,
is facing mounting pressure.
to address the allegations of election rigging.
Opposition groups are boycotting parliament.
They're demanding new elections, and protests are happening throughout the country.
Kavalashvili maintains that the elections were conducted fairly.
But his legitimacy is being questioned
The outgoing president and international observers have expressed concerns.
about the fairness and transparency of the vote.
This situation underscores how fragile democratic institutions can be.
And the importance of addressing public concerns about the integrity of elections.
The world is watching as Georgia navigates this crisis.
Will Kavalashvili be able to restore public faith in the political process?
Let's shift back to Syria.
Where we're hearing more stories from those who endured the horrors of Sadnaya prison,
One former inmate talked about the constant fear he felt.
never knowing if each day would be his last.
He described the torture.
The starvation, the disease, and the psychological torment
One guard broke his back by jumping on him.
as punishment for a minor rule violation.
These accounts are hard to hear.
But they're so important in understanding the brutality of the Assad regime.
And the lasting trauma those who survived its prisons carry with them.
They highlight the critical importance of holding those who commit human rights abuses accountable and the urgent need for justice and reconciliation in Syria.
In the U.S. now,
Former President Trump's legal battles continue,
he's now suing CBS, the BBC's U.S. broadcast partner.
accusing them of deceptive conduct.
In an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris,
This is just one of many legal challenges Trump is facing.
and it reflects the contentious relationship he has with the media.
His legal team claims the interview was misleading,
and unfairly portrayed him.
while CBS is defending their reporting
This case brings to light the ongoing tensions between Trump and the media.
and raises questions about freedom of the press, the legal complexities of defamation, and how courts handle these disputes between politicians and media outlets. In South Korea,
The impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol has begun.
the Constitutional Court is now tasked with deciding if Yoon's actions warrant removing him from office.
This decision has huge implications for the country's future,
The trial has already fueled more protests and deepened political divisions.
and citizens are closely watching the proceedings.
This case emphasizes the checks and balances within South Korea's democratic system.
And how important it is to uphold those principles.
The Assad family, once rulers of Syria,
Are now seeking refuge in Russia as their future hangs in the balance.
after decades of iron-fisted rule, Bashar al-Assad, his wife Asma, and their children were granted asylum in Moscow.
They hastily left Damascus.
As rebel forces closed in on the capital,
It was a dramatic end to their reign.
their future is unclear.
Will they be prosecuted for war crimes?
What will happen to their assets?
Thought to be hidden overseas.
The international community is watching as this situation develops.
Grappling with questions of accountability for the atrocities committed under Assad's rule in the U.S.
The murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has fueled a disturbing online trend.
We've discussed the online fandom surrounding Luigi Mangione,
The murder suspect.
and it seems things have taken another disturbing turn.
People are now trying to profit from the case by selling free Luigi merchandise.
Some online platforms like Amazon are removing these items.
But they're popping up elsewhere
This raises serious questions about profiting from a murder.
and potentially celebrating violence.
It also sheds light on the downsides of internet culture.
The tendency to sensationalize and commodify even the most tragic events.
Back in Fiji,
Authorities are continuing their investigation into that suspected Pina Colada poisoning at the Warwick, Fiji resort,
they're working to determine the source of the contamination.
and to ensure the safety of future guests.
They've sent samples for testing, and the resort is cooperating with the investigation.
This incident is a reminder for travelers to be extra cautious about food and drink safety.
Especially when they're in unfamiliar environments.
Thorough investigations and transparent communication are crucial in maintaining confidence in the tourism industry.
In South America,
President Lula da Silva's recovery is progressing
he's back in Brasilia
and has resumed his official duties.
after brain bleed surgery.
His return to work is a good sign.
A sign of progress in his recovery and a return to normalcy for the Brazilian government,
But it does underscore the pressures of leadership.
especially at his age.
Former President Trump's statement about ending daylight saving time.
Continues to generate discussion. Those who agree with Trump believe that changing our clocks twice a year is disruptive to sleep.
And has a negative effect on health.
They also think that sticking with daylight saving time could be good for the economy.
Opponents argue that permanent daylight saving time could mean darker mornings
Especially in winter.
and could make commutes more dangerous.
They also worry about the potential disruptions to routines and schedules,
This debate shows how complex timekeeping is.
and how it affects different aspects of society.
Trump's statement has definitely revived this long-standing debate,
Back to Thailand.
where the community impacted by the bombing at the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair is trying to cope with the tragedy,
As families mourn their lost loved ones,
and the injured start to heal,
the nation is united in condemning this attack.
and determined to prevent future tragedies.
The investigation is ongoing,
And authorities are working to determine what led to the attack.
and to find those responsible,
This act of violence has affected the nation,
highlighting how fragile peace and security are
and the constant effort and vigilance needed to maintain them.
in Brazil.
President Lula da Silva offered a powerful message of unity.
In his first public appearance since brain bleed surgery, he offered forgiveness to those who dislike him.
He spoke about the need to move forward with compassion and understanding
His words brought hope.
for healing and reconciliation.
In a nation struggling with political differences,
It was a message of strength and unity.
that's caught the attention of the world. In Georgia,
The newly appointed president, Mikhail Kavalashvili,
is facing growing pressure.
to address the claims of election rigging
Opposition groups are boycotting parliament.
and demanding new elections.
Protests continue throughout the country,
Kavalashvili insists the elections were fair.
but his legitimacy is being questioned.
The outgoing president and international observers have concerns about the fairness and transparency of the vote.
This shows how fragile democratic institutions are.
and how important it is to address public concerns about the legitimacy of elections.
The world is watching as Georgia navigates this crisis.
Will Kavlashvili restore public trust in their political system?
Back to Syria now.
Where we're learning more about the experiences of those imprisoned in Saydnaya.
One former inmate spoke about the constant fear he lived with.
Unsure if he'd survive each day.
He spoke about the torture.
Starvation disease and the psychological manipulation.
A guard even broke his back by jumping on him as punishment.
For a minor rule violation.
These are challenging stories to hear.
But they're so important in helping us understand the brutality of the Assad regime.
And the trauma that survivors live with.
They highlight why it's so important to hold those who commit these crimes accountable.
And the urgent need for justice and reconciliation in Syria, in the U.S.
Former President Trump's legal issues continue.
He's suing CBS,
The BBC's U.S. broadcast partner.
accusing them of deceptive conduct in an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris.
This is another legal challenge for Trump.
As he gets ready to return to the White House,
It really shows the tense relationship between Trump and the media,
his legal team says the interview is misleading.
and unfairly portrayed him.
But CBS stands by their reporting.
This case raises questions about freedom of the press.
The legal complexities of defamation and how the courts should handle disputes like this between politicians and media outlets.
South Korea's impeachment trial.
Of President Yoon Suk Yeol is underway,
The Constitutional Court faces a tough task.
deciding whether Yoon should be removed from office.
Their decision will shape the country's future
The trial has fueled more protests.
and further divided South Koreans.
People are following the proceedings closely.
This really shows the checks and balances in South Korea's democracy.
And the importance of maintaining those constitutional principles.
The Assad family
Once rulers of Syria,
are in Russia seeking refuge.
their future is uncertain after decades of ruling with an iron fist.
Bashar al-Assad, his wife and children were given asylum in Moscow.
They quickly left Damascus.
As rebel forces moved toward the capital,
It was a dramatic end to their rule.
their future is unknown.
Could they face prosecution for war crimes?
What will happen to their assets believed to be hidden overseas?
The world is watching as the situation unfolds.
Wrestling with questions about accountability for the terrible things that happened while Assad was in power.
In the U.S.,
The murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has sparked a troubling online trend.
we've talked about the online support for Luigi Mangione.
The man suspected of the murder.
And now it's taken an unsettling turn toward profit.
Free Luigi merchandise is being sold online,
Sites like Amazon are removing the items.
but they're still available on other sites.
It raises serious ethical questions
About profiting from a murder.
and potentially encouraging violence.
It shows a dark side of internet culture,
The way some people turn even the most tragic events into a spectacle.
turning them into something to make money from.
Back in Fiji.
The investigation into the suspected Pina Colada poisoning continues at the Warwick, Fiji resort,
They're working to figure out what contaminated the drinks.
and make sure guests are safe in the future.
The resort is working with investigators, and they've sent samples for testing
This is a reminder for travelers to be careful,
about what they eat and drink.
especially when traveling,
It's vital to investigate these incidents thoroughly.
and be transparent to keep people's trust in the tourism industry.
In South America,
President Lula da Silva continues to recover.
he's back in Brasilia doing his job after brain surgery.
His return to work is positive.
It shows he's getting better, and things are getting back to normal in the government,
Of course, his health scare shows the pressure leaders face.
especially someone his age.
Former President Trump's vow to end daylight saving time.
Has sparked a lot of discussion globally.
People who support Trump's idea believe changing the clocks messes with sleep.
That is bad for health.
They also think sticking with daylight saving could boost the economy,
Those against it say permanent daylight saving would mean dark mornings
especially during the winter.
and could make driving dangerous.
They're also worried about disruptions to daily routines
This debate shows how complicated it is to manage time.
and how time affects different parts of life.
Trump has reignited a debate that's been going on for a long time.
Back in Thailand,
The community hit by the bombing at the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair is trying to heal,
families are grieving for loved ones.
and the injured are beginning to recover,
The nation has come together to condemn the attack.
and wants to prevent anything like it from happening again,
The investigation continues.
as authorities try to piece together what happened and bring those responsible to justice.
This was a terrible act of violence,
That reminds us how vulnerable we are,
especially in crowded places.
and how much these acts of violence impact us.
Investigators are working hard to understand the reasons behind this attack.
And find those responsible.
But the emotional wounds will remain long after the investigation is over.
In Brazil,
President Lula da Silva has shown the power of forgiveness.
in his first public appearance since surgery, he extended an olive branch to those who hate him.
He spoke about moving forward with compassion and understanding,
His words resonated in a politically divided nation.
bringing hope for healing and reconciliation.
His message of strength and unity has captured the attention of the world in Georgia.
The recently appointed President Mikhail Kavalishvili.
Is facing calls to address the allegations of election fraud
Opposition groups are refusing to participate in parliament.
and demanding new elections.
Protests continue across the nation,
Kavalishvili insists the elections were fair.
but many doubt his legitimacy.
The outgoing president and international observers have expressed concerns about the election
This shows how delicate democracy is.
and how crucial it is to make sure people believe elections are fair.
The world is watching Georgia.
As the country deals with this situation,
Can Kavalishvili convince people that the political process is trustworthy?
let's go back to Syria now.
We're hearing more about the experiences of those who are imprisoned in Cyclone.
One former inmate shared his experience of constant fear.
Never sure if he'd live to see another day.
He spoke about the torture.
The lack of food, the illness, and the mental manipulation.
One guard broke his back by jumping on him as a form of punishment.
For a small rule violation.
These stories are difficult to hear,
But they help us understand how brutal the Assad regime was.
and the trauma people carry with them after surviving these prisons,
It's why it's crucial to hold perpetrators accountable.
and why justice and reconciliation are desperately needed in Syria, back in the U.S.
Former President Trump is facing another lawsuit.
This time he's suing CBS, the BBC's U.S. broadcast partner.
He's accusing them of misleading editing in an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris.
This is just one of the many legal challenges he's dealing with.
And it highlights the strained relationship he has with the media.
His legal team claims the interview was edited to misrepresent him.
CBS is defending their reporting.
This case raises questions about freedom of the press and the laws around defamation.
It makes you wonder how courts handle disputes between politicians and media organizations in South Korea.
The impeachment trial for President Yoon Suk-yeol has started.
The Constitutional Court has a difficult decision ahead of them.
They must decide whether to remove Yoon from office.
This is a major decision for the country
The trial has already led to more protests.
and divided the nation further.
Citizens are watching closely.
This situation shows the importance of the checks and balances in South Korea's government.
And the need to uphold their constitution.
The Assad family, who once ruled Syria,
Are now in Russia seeking safety.
their future is uncertain after they ruled for decades.
Bashar al-Assad, along with his family, have been given asylum in Moscow.
They fled Damascus quickly.
As rebels approach the city,
It was a dramatic end to their time in power.
what's next for them?
Will they be held accountable for war crimes?
What will happen to their assets hidden around the world?
The world is watching to see what happens.
They're wondering if anyone will be held responsible for the awful things that happened under Assad. Shifting back to the U.S.
The murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has sparked a troubling online trend.
We've talked about the online fan base for the suspect, Luigi Mangione.
And now things have taken a turn towards making money off the situation.
People are selling merchandise that says Free Luigi,
Some sites like Amazon have removed the items.
but you can still find them in other places online.
This raises questions about whether it's right to profit from murder.
And if this is a way of encouraging violence,
It's a disturbing trend.
and it reveals a downside of the internet.
The tendency to turn terrible events into a spectacle or a product.
In Fiji,
Investigators continue to look into the suspected Pina Colada poisoning at the Warwick, Fiji resort
they're trying to determine what caused the contamination.
and ensure the safety of future visitors.
The resort is working with investigators.
And they've sent samples to be tested.
This is a reminder to be careful about what you consume.
Especially when you're traveling.
It's important to investigate these types of situations thoroughly.
And communicate clearly so people continue to trust the tourism industry.
In South America,
President Lula da Silva is on the mend.
he's back in the capital working again after brain surgery.
It's a good sign that he's back.
Things are returning to normal in the government,
This health scare shows the demands of leadership.
especially for someone his age.
Former President Trump's decision to end daylight saving time.
Is getting a lot of attention around the world.
Some people agree with Trump and believe changing our clocks twice a year disrupts our sleep.
And is bad for us.
They also think that sticking with daylight saving time could benefit the economy.
Those who disagree with Trump worry that permanent daylight saving would result in dark mornings
especially in winter.
and could cause more accidents on the road.
They're also worried about the changes to schedules and routines
This debate shows how complicated time management can be.
and how it impacts our lives.
Trump has definitely revived a debate that's been around for a while.
Back in Thailand.
The community impacted by the bombing at the Red Cross Doi Loifa Fair is working to heal,
Families are mourning those they've lost.
and those who are hurt are starting to recover,
The nation is condemning the attack.
and working to stop similar tragedies from happening in the future,
The investigation continues.
as authorities work to understand what happened and find those responsible.
This act of violence has affected the entire country.
It shows how fragile peace and security are
And the importance of constantly working to maintain them.
in Brazil.
President Lula da Silva has shown us the strength of forgiveness.
During his first public appearance since surgery, he offered forgiveness to those who hate him.
He spoke about moving forward and being compassionate,
His words were heard in a divided nation.
bringing a message of hope and reconciliation.
His message of strength and unity has been noticed by the world. In Georgia,
The newly appointed President Mikhail Kavalishvili.
is facing mounting pressure to address concerns about the election
Opposition groups are boycotting parliament.
and calling for new elections.
People are protesting all over the country.
Kavashvili insists the elections were fair.
But his legitimacy is in question. Host.
As new alliances emerge and regional powers compete for influence, what will the future hold for Syria?
The situation is undeniably complex and volatile. The potential for more conflict is a serious concern. The international community is walking a tightrope, trying to balance various interests and concerns as they work to shape the future of Syria. It's a critical juncture in the region's history, and the world is watching closely. What will emerge from the ashes of this conflict?
Turning back to the U.S., there's been a development in the legal battles former President Trump is facing.
A federal magistrate judge has ordered Trump to provide sworn testimony in a defamation case brought against him by ABC News. This order, related to inaccurate statements made by the network's anchor George Stephanopoulos about Trump being found liable for rape, is another legal hurdle for Trump as he prepares for his return to the White House.
This case highlights the complex legal landscape Trump is navigating, with numerous lawsuits and investigations still pending. It seems the legal battles from his previous presidency continue to cast a shadow over his political comeback.
Shifting gears, let's take a deeper look at the human cost of Syria's long and brutal conflict. We're hearing more harrowing accounts from those who were imprisoned in the notorious Saydnaya prison, a place known for its horrific conditions.
It's truly heartbreaking. One former inmate described Saydnaya as a breathing corpse, emphasizing the chilling dehumanization that took place within its walls.
He spoke of severe beatings, near starvation, rampant disease, and the constant fear of execution. He even described how his back was broken when a guard jumped on him as punishment for a minor infraction. These accounts are incredibly difficult to hear, but they are essential in understanding the brutality of the Assad regime and the immense challenges those who survived its prisons now face.
These stories really underscore the importance of accountability for those who committed human rights abuses. Justice and reconciliation are desperately needed in Syria.
In other news, former President Trump has reignited a long-standing debate with his vow to end daylight saving time.
His declaration has sparked renewed discussions about the pros and cons of changing our clocks twice a year. Some experts even suggest his position might be influenced by Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, a libertarian who's known for his cost-cutting measures and has received praise from Elon Musk, who will be advising Trump.
While Milei's approach has had success in Argentina, it's unclear if those policies would be effective in the U.S. context. The debate over daylight saving time will likely continue as lawmakers grapple with the potential impact on various aspects of American life.
In Georgia, the political situation remains tense following the appointment of Mikhail Kavalishvili, a former footballer, as the new president.
His presidency is off to a rocky start. Opposition groups are rejecting his legitimacy, claiming the recent elections were rigged, and protests are taking place across the country.
The outgoing president, Salome Zurabishvili, has even gone so far as to call Kavalishvili's election a travesty, saying she represents Georgia's last remaining legitimate institution.
This political turmoil highlights the deep divisions within Georgian society, especially regarding their aspirations for EU membership and concerns about the ruling party's authoritarian leanings. The international community is keeping a close eye on this situation as Georgia grapples with its democratic future. Kavulashvili's leadership will be truly tested as he navigates these turbulent waters.
It's been a day packed with news from around the world.
We've covered a lot of ground, from political turmoil to social unrest and even natural disasters.
These stories are a reminder of the challenges we face globally, but also the resilience of the human spirit.
It's crucial to stay informed and engaged with the events shaping our world.
Thank you for joining us.